In today's video, we are going to be talking about the exact exercises that we use with top level fighters like Mike Trizano to help them develop devastating striking power. Let's get it. What is going on? Coach Adam back with another Fight Science Made Simple video. Look, in the ever-evolving world of combat sport, it truly isn't enough just to win anymore. Fighters, combat athletes that want to make a career out of combat sports, to secure contracts and make it to the top, they have to make a statement. And we all know there is no better way to make a statement than to finish guys with devastating strikes. Take a look at one of our athletes, Mike Trizano. He fought in UFC 281 and had an impressive, devastating finish. His contract was up and he had to make a statement. So it isn't enough just to win anymore. We have to make sure that we are finishing guys in a devastating way. So that's what we're gonna be talking about today. But before we jump into it, if you're new to the channel, welcome. We cover everything from strength and conditioning to nutrition and weight management for combat athletes. Our goal is to help you dominate on the mats or in the cage. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on anything that we're dropping. And if you're in a good mood today, feeling kind of generous, feel free to hit that like button. It really helps us and it allows us to reach more combat athletes in need. So today we're gonna be talking about 4 of my favorite types of exercises that we use with Mike Trizano to help him develop some devastating punching power. But before we dive into the specifics and talk about the exact exercise that we used with Mike to help him finish his fight, we have to first understand the science behind power. It's very important that we understand the why so then we can put more intent behind the exercises. It's not enough just to do the exercises, we have to do them with intent to get maximal, optimal results. So in order to understand power, we have to understand something called the force velocity curve. I'm gonna bring up the force velocity curve right over here. On one end of the force velocity curve, we have force, and on the other end of the force velocity curve, we have velocity. So starting on the force side, force is pretty straightforward. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's the maximal force that we can produce. And the best way to think about this is maximal effort, absolute strength lifts. So if you're going for like a 1 rep max on a deadlift or a back squat, this is the most force that you can produce. And on the other side of the curve where we have velocity, velocity is very simple. This is distance over time, or basically how fast we can go from point A to point B. Think about sprinting or jumping. So why is this curve important for power? If we think about the power that goes behind our punches, power is simply a product of force times velocity. We cannot have power without having force and without having velocity. We need 2 parts of this equation. So you can get strong and strong and strong and strong and it will help make you powerful, but eventually there's gonna come a point where you're too strong and you're not fast enough and you have to focus on the other side of the curve. Vice versa, you can get fast and fast and fast and fast, but if you can't put any force behind it, you're not going to be able to generate any power. So it's very important that we understand where we are weakest on this curve, where we are strongest, so then we can invest the most energy in turning those weaknesses into strengths, so then we can produce more power. So the 4 exercises that we are going to talk about today are going to cover various points along the curve. Now, with all of the athletes that we work with, from amateurs to pros to hobbyists, we always put them through some strength testing first. We figure out where their strengths are, we figure out where their weaknesses are, we have them back squat to sub-max intensities so we know where their strength is, we have them jump so we know how powerful, where their velocity is, and then we fill in the gaps. Wherever they're weakest is where we put the most intention, and that's how we can develop some devastating punching power. So now that we understand what power is and how we produce it, now we can start talking about some exercises to improve the specific points on that force velocity curve. So starting all the way to the right side of the curve, all the way on our force end of the spectrum, comes exercise number 1. This is going to be our maximal strength exercises. Maximal strength is very simple. We want to do something like a back squat or a deadlift, and we want to work all the way up to 90 or 100% of our 1 rep max. max. This is going to be very heavy weight. So it's very important that you have good technique and you work with a coach that understands how to push you to those limits safely. Don't just go to the gym, put some weight on a bar and lift as much as you can. You're gonna get hurt that way. But maximal strength work is very important for improving the force side of the curve because we are generating maximal force from our muscles. We're teaching our brain how to recruit the different muscles in our body to produce force, and this ability to produce force is going to obviously improve the force side of the curve. This is the first place that I start with most athletes that have a relatively low training age. So if an athlete just naturally isn't strong or they haven't really spent a lot of time in the gym, just by getting them stronger, just by working on maximal strength exercises, we see maximal improvements in their power capabilities. Now, there is a point of diminishing return. So let's take a squat, for example. If I have an athlete that can squat anywhere from 1.5 to 2 times their body weight, then it's probably not the right investment of energy in trying to make them stronger. They're not power lifters, they're not strength athletes. And so then we can start working more towards the velocity side of the curve to make them more powerful. So we understand strength and why it's important for power and force production. Let's just start to move towards the left side, the velocity side of the curve with exercise number 2. These are going to be our Olympic movements like the clean, the snatch, the jerk, and their different variations. These are great ways to start improving our strength speed and our peak power. We want to work with anywhere from 30% to 80% of our 1 rep max. If we're going to be working more towards that 30% range, then we're going to be working closer to power. And if we're going to be working closer to the 80% range, we're going to be working a little bit closer to strength speed. Strength speed isn't necessarily peak power, it's definitely more powerful than our maximal absolute strength, but the load is still a little bit heavier. It's more about moving the heaviest weights possible as fast as we can. It's more about adding speed to heavier weights, so we're still using relatively high intensities like 80% of our 1 rep max. Now there's going to be a speed component. Now we're starting to add some velocity and we're teaching our body how to move that force a little bit more quicker. Now talking about peak power, we can use the same exercises like a clean or their variations like a clean pull to improve power, but we just lower the intensity a little bit. So if I start using lighter weight, like something at 30% of my 1 rep max, I'm going to be able to do the same movement, but I'm going to be able to perform it with more velocity, okay? These Olympic movements are great for athletic development, increasing our peak power, and our overall ability to move heavier weights very explosively. I like to use some kind of Olympic variation pretty much year round, but as we get closer to a fight or a competition date, we're gonna spend more time towards the peak power or even our speed strength as we go closer to the left side of the curve. Our strength speed is something that I love to use maybe in pre-camp. So if we're maybe 12 to 10 weeks out from a fight, we want to start speeding our athletes up a little bit. We start to introduce them to the strength speed side of things. And then as we transition into a fight camp, we start to get 8 weeks out or so, then we can introduce the peak power side of things. But again, Olympic movements are an incredible tool to start to bridge the gap between the force side of the curve and the velocity side of the curve. And once we bridge that gap, then we really start to produce some devastating power. Continuing to the left side of the curve, exercise number 3 to help us develop some devastating punching power is going to be ballistic exercises. So we're going to use ballistic exercises to start to improve our speed strength now. So a ballistic exercise, something like a weighted jump or a med ball throw, these help us improve the velocity of our movement, but we're still moving an external load like a weighted ball or just a weight in general. So we're not working true velocity, but the loads are going to be a little bit lighter than if we were using an Olympic movement. So we're not working true peak power or even force production. So again, this is kind of like a middle ground when it comes to our force velocity curve. I really like ballistic exercises, especially as we get closer to fights, because it increases our speed, our rate of force development, basically how quickly we can produce force, in a way that doesn't really build a lot of fatigue. If we think about something like a med ball throw, this is primarily the concentric point of the movement, or the point of the movement where force is being produced. There really isn't a lot of eccentric movement or an absorption phase when it comes to ballistic movements. So it really allows us to teach our athletes how to produce force without worrying about them absorbing that force, which could lead to injury or just poor movement quality. Now, those eccentric phases are important and they come into play in different phases and different times, but if we're just talking about speed strength, and if we're just talking about our rate of force development, how quickly we can produce force, then ballistic exercises like med ball throws are some of the best options that you can do. And the fourth exercise that we're going to use to develop devastating punching power, coming all the way in on the left side of the curve, really focusing on our peak velocity, these are going to be plyometric exercises, okay? So you hear the term plyometrics thrown around a lot, but a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes misuse the term and misuse how to properly use plyometrics. Plyometrics are all about generating as much force in the shortest amount of time possible. So moving an athlete from point A to point B as quickly as possible, utilizing something called the stretch shortening cycle. Now, I could make an entire video talking about the stretch shortening cycle, so we're not gonna go into a lot of detail on how it works here, but plyometrics are some of the best movements for velocity, speed, and overall athletic development to help athletes become more powerful. Some great examples of plyometrics are things like bounding, depth jumps, and vertical jumps. So by using plyometric exercises, we can improve the velocity side of the curve using this stretch shortening cycle, kind of like a rubber band, right? If you have a rubber band and you stretch it out really slow, and then release it, it's gonna move, but it's only gonna move a short distance. But if you take a rubber band and you rapidly stretch it and let go, it's going to move much more violently and much more explosively because you're quickly building up energy and then releasing that energy. That rubber band is stretching and then shortening. And our muscles work the exact same way. If I just try to stand here and I jump and I bend my knees slow and then I try to jump as high as I can, my jump's not gonna be very high. But if I rapidly bend my knees and then jump, my muscle is acting like that rubber band. I'm increasing the velocity that I'm able to produce. In that jump, I'm going from point A to point B as quickly as I can, and this is going to help me become more powerful. So when we put all four pieces of the puzzle together, we work our maximal strength to increase our force development. We use Olympic movements to improve our strength, speed, and our peak power. We use ballistic exercises to improve our speed strength, and we use plyometric exercises to improve our velocity. You put every piece of the puzzle together, and this is how we get more powerful. This is how we start finishing guys with devastating strikes, and this is how we make a name for ourselves and start to make a statement in our fight career. So there you have it. That's everything that I have for you today for developing some devastating power. As always, let me know what questions you have. I know I covered a lot, and there were a lot of details in this video, so let me know what questions you have in the comments down below. And until next time, I'll catch you later.